A chilling silence fell upon the ice, a vacuum swallowing 129 souls in two state-of-the-art ships, leaving behind only the whispered tales of an Arctic nightmare that continues to haunt us over 170 years later. This is the dark legend of the Franklin expedition, a saga of imperial ambition devoured by the unforgiving unknown, where human hubris met the raw, indifferent power of the frozen north. In the year 1845, the British Empire stood at the undisputed zenith of its power, its red dominion stretching across continents and oceans. Yet, one elusive, defiant prize remained unconquered, the fabled Northwest Passage. This wasn't merely a navigational shortcut through the icy labyrinth of the Canadian Arctic, it was a symbol of ultimate triumph, promising untold strategic advantage, global prestige, and a maritime route that had defied discovery for centuries. To claim this ultimate navigational feat, the Admiralty dispatched its finest, most ambitious expedition yet, an undertaking meticulously planned to be the definitive answer, led by a man whose very name was synonymous with Arctic exploration, Rear Admiral Sir John Franklin. Franklin, a seasoned veteran of polar voyages, had already weathered numerous expeditions, including perilous journeys that had earned him the moniker "the man who ate his boots" due to desperate survival tactics. However, at 59 years old, he was arguably past his physical prime for such a brutally demanding endeavor. Despite this, his reputation for unwavering resolve, meticulous planning, and profound experience inspired boundless confidence within the British establishment. He was entrusted with command of two truly extraordinary vessels, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. These were no ordinary ships, they were masterpieces of naval engineering, heavily reinforced with an internal skeletal system of iron, sheathed externally with thick planking and iron plating to withstand crushing ice. Equipped with powerful steam engines adapted from railway locomotives, capable of driving them through slush and calmer waters, and provisioned with enough supplies to last an astounding 3 years, every conceivable detail had been considered. From a vast library of books for the officers' intellectual sustenance to bespoke cutlery bearing the Franklin crest, these ships embodied Britain's unshakable faith in technology, scientific prowess, and imperial might. They were believed to be invincible. On May 19, 1845, the expedition sailed from Greenhithe, England, a spectacular display of national pride and technological marvel. The piers were thronged with cheering crowds, eager to witness the departure of what was widely expected to be a triumphant return. The ships, laden with hope, carried 129 officers and men towards what they believed would be glory, a historic moment of discovery that would forever etch their names into the annals of exploration. The nation watched as Erebus and Terror vanished over the horizon, last sighted by whaling vessels in Baffin Bay in late July. They were destined for the top of the world, to chart a passage no European had successfully navigated. What they found instead was a silent, frozen tomb. The first year passed with the usual British stoicism. Arctic expeditions were, by their very nature, isolated endeavors, often out of contact for years. But as the second year bled into the third, and no word, no sign, no triumphant return materialized, a creeping anxiety began to grip the nation. The initial confidence, born of technological hubris, curdled into a cold, dread fear. Where were Franklin and his men? The vast, indifferent expanse of the Arctic had simply swallowed them whole, leaving not a trace. Lady Jane Franklin, Sir John's determined, influential, and utterly relentless wife, became the driving force behind a global campaign to find her husband and his crew. She personally funded numerous search parties, badgered the Admiralty, leveraged her extensive network of connections, and ensured the lost expedition became a tragic cause célèbre, transforming a private loss into a national obsession. Her unwavering belief in her husband's survival spurred an unprecedented outpouring of resources and effort. The ensuing long Arctic search was unparalleled in its scale and duration. Over the next decade, dozens of expeditions, both British and American, scoured the Arctic archipelago, battling unimaginable cold, treacherous ice, and the crushing isolation that had likely claimed Franklin's own ships. Each passing season without a concrete trace only deepened the dread, cementing the Franklin expedition as one of history's most profound and chilling mysteries. The prevailing public imagination, clinging to tales of heroism, conjured images of the ships frozen majestically in the ice, their crews patiently awaiting rescue, perhaps enjoying their vast library. But the reality, as it slowly, agonizingly began to emerge, was far, far more grim than any heroic fantasy. By the early 1850s, the first concrete, terrifying fragments of their fate began to surface. In 1850, searchers discovered 3 graves on Beechey Island, a barren, desolate outpost. Within these frozen resting places lay the perfectly preserved bodies of 3 crewmen, John Torrington, John Hartnell, and William Brain. Their faces, eerily serene and frozen in time, offered a haunting glimpse into the expedition's earliest days, a macabre snapshot from 1846. The official story at the time suggested they succumbed to common ailments like tuberculosis or pneumonia, scourges of the era. But even then, there was an unsettling anomaly. The extraordinary preservation of their bodies hinted at something more profound, something about the Arctic's insidious grip that transcended mere disease. It was the first chilling sign that this wasn't just an expedition that went missing, it was a disaster unfolding with an almost supernatural slowness, a whisper of something deeply wrong from the very beginning. Initial studies of the remains, performed much later, would reveal astonishingly high levels of lead in their bones, a clue that would unravel a darker truth. More than just graves, Inuit hunters and explorers stumbled upon scattered relics over the years, pieces of equipment, fragments of clothing, silverware stamped with the Franklin crest, and even tattered remnants of canvas. These were tantalizing clues, but they painted a grim picture of distress and abandonment, not triumph. The true, horrifying scale of the disaster, however, would only truly be revealed by the groundbreaking expedition of Captain Francis Leopold McClintock in 1859. This was the moment the public imagination of heroic stoicism shattered. McClintock, meticulously following invaluable Inuit reports and employing their unparalleled knowledge of the land, made the most significant and devastating discovery, a cairn on King William Island. Inside, protected from the elements, lay a metal cylinder containing a single, desperate note. It was double-dated, a chilling postscript to a grand dream. The first entry, dated May 28, 1847, was brief and almost deceptively optimistic, stating all was well and the ships were wintering at Beechey Island, having successfully navigated a portion of the passage. Then, etched in a frantic scrawl in the margin, dated April 25, 1848, was a horrifying update that ripped through all remaining illusions. It stated that Sir John Franklin himself had died on June 11, 1847, nearly a year earlier, and that the ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, had been deserted on April 22, 1848, trapped in the ice for over a year and a half. The remaining 105 survivors, under the command of Captain Francis Crozier, were attempting an overland march south, towards the Great Fish River, a desperate 1,000-mile trek through a frozen wasteland, hauling heavy boats and what little provisions they had left. It was a death march, pure and simple, a final, futile grasp at survival. McClintock's team, guided by the note, then followed the supposed route of these retreating men across the desolate expanse of King William Island. What they found there sent shivers through Victorian society and continues to haunt historians. Skeletons were scattered across the bleak landscape, mute testaments to utter despair. Some were found clutching prayer books, others slumped in their harnesses, having died literally dragging their impossible burdens, their last breaths expended in a desperate, frozen struggle. And then came the truly horrifying evidence, bones found later by other explorers, bearing distinct cut marks, consistent with defleshing. The unspeakable truth began to emerge from the silence: cannibalism. The well-fed, well-provisioned British sailors, proud symbols of imperial might and civility, had been reduced to the most primal fight for survival, consuming their dead in a desperate, futile attempt to cling to life. The British public, initially fed tales of heroism and noble sacrifice, was now confronted with a reality far darker, a descent into unimaginable horror that challenged every notion of Victorian civility and the supposed superiority of European man. What drove these men to such extremes? Theories abounded, and continue to be debated, forming a complex web of disaster. The original research note mentions that medical factors like tuberculosis, scurvy, lead poisoning, and botulism have been proposed to explain the high death rate prior to the desertion. Modern analysis of the Beechey Island graves and other remains confirmed dangerously high levels of lead in the bones of the crew, a specific historical detail that has become central to the tragedy. This lead, almost certainly leaching from the poorly soldered tin cans that held their provisions, was an insidious poison. Lead poisoning, a silent killer, causes neurological damage, leading to symptoms like profound fatigue, confusion, irritability, and ultimately, a creeping madness. It would have debilitated the men, eroding their judgment, morale, and physical capabilities long before starvation fully set in. Beyond the insidious lead, scurvy, a debilitating disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, would have weakened them further, causing open sores, joint pain, bleeding gums, and crushing lethargy. Tuberculosis and other infections would have spread through the cramped ships, preying on weakened immune systems. Some theorize that botulism from contaminated, poorly preserved food could have incapacitated many. The confluence of these factors, lead poisoning slowly stealing their minds and bodies, scurvy robbing them of strength, diseases picking them off one by one, all combined with starvation, freezing temperatures, and the psychological torment of being utterly isolated, trapped, and slowly dying, paints a picture of hellish agony that stretched over years. It was not a sudden disaster, but a slow, creeping horror that gnawed at their bodies and minds, eroding their humanity piece by agonizing piece. Despite McClintock's grim discoveries, the ultimate fate of the expedition remained incomplete. Where were the crucial logs and official records mentioned in the Victory Point note? What truly happened to the ships themselves, and to the last men who attempted that desperate march? The mystery persisted, tantalizing and unresolved, compelling future generations to continue the search. One such dedicated individual was Lieutenant Frederick Schwatka, USA, whose meticulous work is chronicled in The Long Arctic Search, the narrative of Lieutenant Frederick Schwatka, USA, 1878-1880, seeking the records of the lost Franklin expedition. Schwatka, unlike many European explorers before him, recognized the profound value of indigenous knowledge. He learned from the Inuit, adopting their survival techniques and, crucially, listening to their oral traditions about the white men who had perished. His expedition, decades after Franklin's initial disappearance, systematically followed the probable route of the retreating sailors, recovering more human remains and artifacts. He was able to relocate many of McClintock's cairns and even found additional graves, including a probable burial site for some of the officers. Schwatka's work further solidified the understanding of the tragic death march, confirming the widespread loss of life along the presumed path of retreat. However, despite his exhaustive efforts and reliance on invaluable indigenous knowledge, the crucial logs and official records of the expedition remained elusive, swallowed by the snow and ice, leaving behind only the harrowing silence of the graves. His search, while adding significant pieces to the puzzle, ultimately underscored the enduring power of the Arctic to guard its secrets. For over 160 years, the two great ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, were believed lost forever, perhaps crushed to splinters by the ice or sunk in unreachable depths. They became mythical, ghost ships sailing the depths of history. Then, in the 21st century, technology finally caught up to the legend, guided by a new generation of searchers and, once again, critical Inuit testimony. In 2014, after years of dedicated searching by Parks Canada, the wreck of HMS Erebus was discovered off King William Island, a triumphant moment for modern archaeology. 2 years later, in 2016, a private search group, the Arctic Research Foundation, acting on detailed Inuit testimony about a ship seen sinking in a particular bay, located HMS Terror in a well-protected inlet, astonishingly intact. The discovery of these ghost ships was nothing short of miraculous. Lying on the seabed, perfectly preserved by the cold, dark waters, they were veritable time capsules from 1848. Images from inside Terror revealed an almost surreal scene, plates still on shelves, beds made, desks with drawers open, scientific equipment seemingly untouched, ready for use. It was as if the crew had simply vanished into thin air, leaving their world behind, abandoning a ship that appeared ready to sail. The condition of the ships offered new clues, suggesting they weren't violently crushed but perhaps abandoned methodically, almost orderly, then slowly succumbed to the elements over time. But the wrecks also posed new, unsettling questions. Where were the vast majority of the personal artifacts that would detail their final days, the journals, the logs? And most importantly, where were the human remains of the men who died aboard, or those who didn't make it ashore? The ships themselves revealed the moment of their abandonment, but not the ultimate fate of the 105 men who marched to their deaths, leaving behind a chilling void. The Franklin expedition remains a harrowing testament to the brutal indifference of nature and the ultimate fragility of human ambition. Was it a curse on the Northwest Passage, a warning against human intrusion into sacred lands, or simply the confluence of ill fortune, bad decisions, and the harsh realities of the Arctic? The evidence suggests a slow, agonizing process, a combination of environmental entrapment, the debilitating effects of lead poisoning on their bodies and minds, the ravages of scurvy and disease, and finally, starvation that drove men to the unthinkable. The story of Sir John Franklin and his men is not just a tale of exploration gone wrong, but a chilling narrative of how quickly civilization can unravel when confronted with truly desperate circumstances, how easily the veneer of civility can be stripped away. 129 men sailed into the unknown, chasing a dream of empire and glory. What they found was a nightmare of ice and despair, a grim battle for survival that none would win. Their ships now rest in silent vigil on the seabed, monuments to a vanished ambition, guarding secrets that may never be fully revealed. The Arctic holds its dead close, and the last, desperate moments of the Franklin expedition remain shrouded in a chilling veil of uncertainty, a dark stain on the annals of human exploration. The ice guards its secrets fiercely, and perhaps some horrors are best left undisturbed in the silent depths.